Mark Carney is making a power move that has Donald Trump scrambling. While Trump thought he could divide and conquer North America by playing Canada and Mexico against each other, Carney just flipped the script entirely. This week, Canada's Prime Minister is heading to Mexico City for what could be the most strategic diplomatic meeting in decades, one that's designed to build an alliance Trump never saw coming. And the timing? It's no coincidence. This is happening just as the United States officially launches its review of the North American trade agreement, setting the stage for what could be Trump's biggest trade war miscalculation yet. To understand why this meeting matters so much, we need to rewind to last fall when Trump was still president-elect, threatening massive tariffs and essentially holding North America hostage with his trade demands. Some Canadian politicians, including Premiers Doug Ford and Danielle Smith, actually fell for Trump's divide-and-conquer strategy.
Well, we're hopeful that they're serious. We saw in the last Parliament the Liberals didn't operate this way. They were happy to have the House of Commons stalled rather than hand over documents relating to one of their scandals. So maybe this is a legitimate new chapter in that. But look, it's quite clear that Liberals had to steal Conservative ideas to get elected. They had to basically concede that Conservatives were right about the carbon tax, about easy bail causing crime waves, and about many other Conservative policies. So that's why we supported things like our idea to remove the GST off of housing. That's why we will support policies that they lift from our platform. Of course, we would support that. What we are on the alert for is when they graft their own tired policies that have been proven not to work onto those pieces of legislation, then it is our job to highlight that for Canadians and to give it all the due diligence that Canadians expect when they elect a minority parliament like that.
The Conservative opposition had been warning about these exact tactics for years. They'd seen how previous administrations tried to pit Canada against Mexico, stealing ideas from both countries while claiming credit for cooperation. The Premier suggested throwing Mexico under the bus, literally proposing to kick Mexico out of the North American Free Trade Deal if it meant saving Canada's relationship with the United States. It was exactly what Trump wanted, his northern neighbors fighting each other instead of standing together against his protectionist agenda. But here's where Trump's plan started to unravel. Instead of weakening the Canada-Mexico relationship, his aggressive tactics actually did the opposite. As Laura McDonald from Carleton University put it, after 8 months of dealing with Trump's unpredictable tariffs and constant threats, it became crystal clear that Canada is not better off without Mexico. The Mexicans, understandably, felt betrayed by those early Canadian statements. They had every reason to be wary of any Canadian embrace after hearing suggestions that they should be thrown out of the trade deal. Trump's miscalculation becomes even more obvious when you look at what's actually happened since he took office. He imposed a staggering 35% tariff on Canadian goods, one of the most protectionist moves by a U.S. administration in a century.
Why are you inherently, and I understand a conservative principle that you wouldn't want the size of the deficit to increase, but given the economic pressures we face, the impact that has on revenue because the economy is contracting, why are you reflexively against a deficit that grows? Like, doesn't it add up?
Well, first of all, I think we should go back and understand what the Conservatives are generally going to do this session. That is hold Mark Carney to his own standard. So he wrote his campaign platform knowing that Trump's tariffs were in effect. He budgeted that out and he committed in his platform a much lower deficit number than what they're now talking about. He committed to capping spending growth, even in the throne speech, which took place months after Trump became president and a full month after the election campaign. So I believe it's fair to hold Mark Carney to the promises on which he got elected. He went to the Canadian people, made a written promise to them, put it in writing in his platform, and I believe it's absolutely fair to hold him to that. Secondly, when the government has to borrow more money, when it's borrowing billions of money, that means it's gobbling up money out of the economy. They are now competing with everyone else who has to borrow money. They're going to compete with you when you renew your mortgage or when you get a mortgage, when you negotiate a line of credit, when businesses go out and try to borrow to invest in the economy. Now they have to compete with the government. So that puts massive pressure on interest rates. It also means taxes at some point, either through.
Economic experts have been analyzing the impact of these tariffs, comparing them to historic trade wars and finding that the current approach breaks campaign promises about deficit levels. When governments increase borrowing at this scale, they compete with regular citizens for loans, putting massive pressure on interest rates. This creates what economists call a hidden inflationary tax that hits working families the hardest. But here's the kicker: Trump gave Mexico a 90-day extension, essentially treating the two countries differently and trying to create resentment between them. Instead, this different treatment just highlighted to both countries that they couldn't trust Trump's promises or rely on his favoritism. The numbers tell the whole story of Trump's failing strategy. Canada's GDP actually shrank by 1.6% in the second quarter of 2025, squeezed by Trump's sectoral tariffs on steel, aluminum, and autos. Meanwhile, Trump kept dangling the carrot of CUSMA-compliant goods being exempt from his tariffs, but then he'd turn around and slap additional levies on Canadian products anyway, whether they fell under the trade agreement or not. It was economic whiplash designed to keep Canada off balance and desperate. But Trump underestimated Mark Carney. The Prime Minister didn't just react to Trump's moves, he started playing a completely different game. First, Carney made some tactical concessions, removing Canada's retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods covered by CUSMA. Critics called it capitulation, but it was actually a chess move. By removing those tariffs, Carney eliminated one of Trump's main talking points and freed up political capital to focus on building alternatives to U.S. dependence.
Half of those, yeah.
They've refused to repeal the No More Pipelines bill. They've refused to repeal the shipping ban, which basically means only Canadian energy cannot be shipped off our western coast. Other countries' energy can go up and down the coast. Only Canadians can. They've refused to repeal the impact assessment regime that they built, which was designed to get to a no. They vetoed Northern Gateway. They layered on all kinds of rules and regulations on the energy sector. And as a result, tens of billions of dollars have fled into other countries. The United States has signed over deals worth over $750 billion on LNG alone.
But
that's something that Canada could have done, and then we wouldn't be talking about a massive contraction. So between the spending that's being increased,
we would still be talking about contraction given our dependence on the States.
We would have been able to diversify. Northern Gateway would have helped us diversify off of the American economy. Trudeau canceled that. Carney cheered for that. He cheered on and applauded Justin Trudeau for doing that. So Canada, after 10 years of Liberal government, is more dependent on the United States for our exports.
It's actually the same. It's 75% of our exports then, 75% of our exports now.
No, but when you consider what it could have been, I mean, Northern Gateway was a real opportunity to get Canadian energy into Asian markets.
But it lost in the courts.
No. Justin Trudeau vetoed that.
No, it lost in the courts decided, and then Trudeau decided not to fight it. He didn't appeal the decision from the court.
Well, you say tomato, I say tomato. Justin Trudeau had the ability to see that pipeline through. He did not want it. I remember his speech when he explained the reason why he did not want Northern Gateway to proceed, despite the fact that there were multiple partnerships agreements signed by First Nations communities along the way, despite the fact it would have opened up Asian markets. He also stacked the deck against Energy East, which would have taken...
The energy sector provides a perfect example of this strategic pivot. For years, Canada had been trying to diversify its energy markets, but Trump's policies inadvertently accelerated this process. The cancellation of key pipeline projects and restrictive energy policies had originally made Canada more dependent on the U.S. market. But now, with Trump's tariffs forcing the issue, Canada has been aggressively pursuing new energy partnerships. While the U.S. has been signing massive LNG deals worth over $750 billion, Canada has been quietly building its own network of energy agreements with Mexico and other partners. These deals represent tens of billions of dollars that are no longer flowing through American markets. Then came the fence mending. In August, even Danielle Smith, one of the premiers who had suggested ditching Mexico, visited Mexico and started repairing relationships. Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne and Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand followed up with their own visit to Mexico, meeting directly with President Claudia Sheinbaum. These weren't just courtesy calls, they were laying the groundwork for something much bigger. Now we get to this week's masterstroke. Carney is heading to Mexico with two separate but related goals that represent a complete strategic pivot away from Trump's America. The first goal is to find ways to work with Mexico to preserve as much North American free trade as possible, despite what Carney calls the most protectionist U.S. administration in a century. But the second goal is even more significant: developing a bilateral trading relationship with Mexico that operates completely independently of whatever whims come out of the White House. This isn't just about trade numbers, though those are impressive enough. Mexico is already Canada's third biggest trading partner, with $56 billion in bilateral trade last year. But Canada currently represents only 5% of Mexico's international trade, meaning there's enormous room for growth. The trip is expected to produce an agreement on a new Canada-Mexico comprehensive partnership and a security dialogue focused on issues like transnational crime and drug smuggling, exactly the kind of cooperation that makes both countries less dependent on U.S. security apparatus. Carney's strategy becomes even clearer when you look at what he's saying publicly. We are focused on elevating our partnerships in trade, commerce, security, and energy, he said before departing for Mexico City. Together, we will build stronger supply chains, create new opportunities for workers, and deliver greater prosperity and certainty for both Canadians and Mexicans. Notice what's missing from that statement? Any mention of the United States or dependence on American markets. The timing of this trip is absolutely crucial. It's happening just as the Trump administration officially launches its review of CUSMA, the trade deal that's supposed to come up for mandatory review in July 2026. But Mexican officials are saying they expect negotiations to start much earlier, potentially this fall. Trump thought he'd go into those negotiations with Canada and Mexico at each other's throats, competing for his favor. Instead, he's facing two countries that are actively building alternatives to American economic dominance. Trump's desperation is starting to show. After Carney removed some of the retaliatory tariffs, Trump called the move nice and said he liked Carney a lot. He even claimed they were working on something and that he wanted to be very good to Canada. This is the same man who spent months calling Canada the 51st state and imposing crushing tariffs. The sudden change in tone reveals just how much Trump needs these trade relationships to work and how much leverage he's actually lost. But the real genius of Carney's approach becomes clear when you consider the broader geopolitical context. The CUSMA review isn't just about trade, it's about the future of North American integration in an increasingly multipolar world. Trump's approach has been to use American economic power as a cudgel, forcing smaller neighbors to compete for his attention. Carney's approach is to build resilient partnerships that can weather whatever political storms come out of Washington. The Canada-Mexico alliance also creates fascinating strategic possibilities that Trump clearly didn't anticipate. Both countries are dealing with the same giant between them, the United States, and both have learned that they can't rely on American promises or American stability. By working together, they can create supply chains that bypass American choke points, develop energy partnerships that reduce dependence on U.S. infrastructure, and build security cooperation that doesn't require American approval. Experts are already noting the potential for this partnership to reshape North American dynamics entirely. As one trade analyst put it, Mexico could be Canada's natural next best trading partner to the United States. There are immediate opportunities for Canada to sell more auto parts to Mexico, along with agricultural products like potash. Mexico, meanwhile, could benefit from Canadian expertise in mining, energy development, and port infrastructure. The security dimension is equally important. Both Canada and Mexico are dealing with pressure from the United States to crack down on border security and drug trafficking. By developing their own security dialogue, they can coordinate responses without being completely dependent on American intelligence or American priorities. This is particularly significant given Trump's tendency to use security concerns as pretexts for economic pressure. Trump's reaction to all of this has been telling. The White House welcomed Canada's removal of some tariffs as long overdue, but there's been notably less enthusiasm about the Canada-Mexico partnership. U.S. Ambassador to Canada Pete Hoekstra recently said that hopes for a much bigger deal with Canada are off the table, at least for now. It's obvious, at least at this point in time, that that's not going to happen, he admitted. That's diplomatic speak for, we overplayed our hand, and now we're dealing with the consequences. The broader implications of Carney's Mexico strategy extend far beyond trade statistics. This is about creating a model for how middle powers can respond to great power coercion in the 21st century. Instead of accepting a binary choice between submission and confrontation, Carney is building what strategists call strategic autonomy, the ability to pursue independent policies even while maintaining important relationships with dominant powers. This approach is already paying dividends in unexpected ways. The partnership with Mexico gives Canada more leverage in its ongoing disputes with China, particularly over canola tariffs. It also provides alternatives for Canadian businesses that have been hurt by Trump's tariff wars. Most importantly, it demonstrates to the world that Trump's transactional approach to international relations creates opportunities for his competitors. The challenges ahead are real, of course. As one expert noted, there's so much pressure right now pushing away from each other as each one tries to secure preferential treatment from Washington. The temptation to throw the other under the bus in exchange for American favor will always be there. But Carney seems to have learned the lesson that Trump himself taught. In a world where great powers use economic coercion as a primary tool, smaller countries need to stick together or hang separately. Trump's fundamental miscalculation was assuming that his neighbors would always prioritize their relationship with the United States above everything else. He thought he could play divide and conquer indefinitely, using America's economic size as a permanent source of leverage. Instead, his aggressive tactics have accelerated exactly the kind of alliance building and economic diversification that reduces American influence over the long term. As Carney heads to Mexico City this week, he's not just conducting diplomacy, he's demonstrating a completely different model for how countries can respond to economic bullying. Instead of accepting Trump's framework where everything revolves around American approval, Carney is building a framework where American approval becomes just one factor among many. That's not capitulation, that's strategic brilliance. The next few months will be crucial in determining whether this Canada-Mexico partnership can weather the pressures of the CUSMA renegotiation. Trump will undoubtedly try to drive wedges between the two countries, offering side deals and threatening consequences for anyone who doesn't play by his rules. But if Carney's strategy works, Trump might find himself facing something he clearly didn't expect, a united front that's prepared to call his bluff. The irony is perfect. Trump's attempt to make America great again by dominating its neighbors has actually accelerated the formation of partnerships designed to reduce dependence on America. His tariff wars, meant to bring manufacturing back to the United States, have pushed Canada and Mexico to develop alternative supply chains. His threats and ultimatums designed to force compliance have created incentives for long-term strategic planning that assumes American unreliability. Carney's Mexico trip represents more than just diplomatic fence-mending. It's the emergence of a new North American order that Trump inadvertently created through his own aggressive tactics. Whether he realizes it or not, Trump's greatest achievement might be teaching his neighbors that they're stronger together than they are competing for his approval. That's a lesson that could reshape the continent for decades to come.